Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. You have no idea how long I've been trying to get set up to film. I was filming on the camera I usually film on, and the colouring was really strange. And then I tried to film on my old Canon. It was not the vibe. I had it set up on a shoebox. So I'm literally having to film on my webcam. I do, however, have my microphone that I use for when I was doing like the audio only version of this podcast. So hopefully the sound is good. So basically, I really wanted to get back into filming these true crime videos for my Something Dark kind of segment on my YouTube channel. If you have any cases that you'd like me to cover, please let me know. As I was doing in the past few videos, I'm going through the cases that I covered in my podcast, so like the audio only version. So you will see me reading the script. I don't know how the true crime podcasters and YouTubers do it. I don't know how they learn off the whole script, but yeah. So if you see my eyes darting from side to side, I'm reading from my script. I wrote a script while I was doing my podcast that I would read off. So please forgive me for that. Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and get into today's case. On December 6, 2009, a woman went missing in West Valley City, Utah. Her husband was named a person of interest in the investigation of her disappearance, but he was never charged. 3 years later, he killed himself and their 2 young sons in a murder-suicide. It's a case that shocked and stunned the public, and as the case unraveled, sordid details came out exposing those involved. Tonight we're going to be covering the case of Susan Powell. Susan Cox Powell was born on October 16th of 1981 in Oregon. She was known to her family and friends as being a kind and loving woman. She was an amazing mother and would do anything for her kids. Susan's husband, Josh Powell, was born on January 20th in 1976 in Oregon, just like Susan. But unlike Susan's upbringing, Josh's childhood is a bit disturbing. Stephen Powell, Josh's dad, was extremely abusive. Josh's parents, Stephen and Tarika Powell, had a tumultuous relationship, one that ended in divorce in 1992. According to Tarika, Stephen was a harsh disciplinarian who pointedly attacked Josh. This had a profound impact on Josh, who tried to hang himself as a teen. The divorce of Stephen and Tarika Powell reads like a novel. They disagreed over everything from parenting to religion, and court documents reveal allegations of mental unfitness, pornography, polygamy, and witchcraft. Stephen accused his then-wife of adopting a mixture of New Age mysticism combined with Mormonism so intense that she practiced witchcraft and devil worship. She also stated that Stephen harangued and verbally abused Josh on a daily basis. She further alleged that Stephen was at times physically abusive to his children. While most people who come from abusive and dysfunctional backgrounds never become violent to others, the same could not be said for Josh Powell. He once threatened his mother with a butcher knife after she asked him to do the dishes. With his father's influence, he also adopted a disparaging view of women. He even killed his sister's pet gerbil. Josh, along with his 3 brothers, ended up in his father's custody, while his sister went to live with his mother. But eventually she too went to live with Stephen. At some point, Stephen Powell's parents got custody of all 5 children. They lived with their grandparents for a year before returning to their mother, who they'd been told they would never see again. By the time they went to live with her, all of them were deeply traumatized. Despite criticizing Tarika's religious beliefs, Stephen became disillusioned with the LDS Church and began adopting extremist views. Moving on to talk about the relationship between Susan and Josh, the story of Susan Cox and Josh Powell began like many others. Both were devout members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, otherwise known as the Mormon Church. Josh met Susan, who was a classmate at his LDS Church Institute of Religion course, during a dinner party at his Tacoma apartment in November 2000. The couple's relationship moved quickly, and just 6 months later, the two got married at the Portland, Oregon temple. Josh was in the midst of job hopping at the time, while Susan left her job as a cosmetologist to be a broker at Wells Fargo. Josh's goal was to become a real estate agent, so Susan got her realtor's license to answer the phone for him. She was dedicated to her new husband's budding career and what she believed would be a lifetime of love, devotion, and happiness. For a brief period following their wedding, Josh and Susan lived at Stephen Powell's home in South Hill, Washington. Initially, unbeknownst to Susan, her father-in-law, Stephen, had developed an obsessive infatuation with her, which was only inflamed by their close proximity.
I just had what is probably the most erotic experience I've had in my entire life. I hate to say it, I mean, of course, because I haven't had that many experiences, but Susan has been feeling ill. She had a cold, and I offered to rub her feet, to rub her toes, to give her some stimulation. That went on. I probably rubbed her feet, her toes, her beautiful feet. She has such pretty feet. Of course, everything about her is pretty, beautiful. And I know she felt it. I mean, I know she couldn't have missed it. She's not naive either. I know from what I've read in her journals. That girl is not naive. When I started massaging her legs, I would have loved to go all the way up her legs, but I did do her calves because her feet were resting in my crotch, so I sort of rubbed her calves. She didn't seem to mind at all having me that close. I mean, I was close. I was touching her with my crotch. It's hard to remember everything I did. Man, I love that woman. She is so beautiful. I can't even get enough of her. Can't get enough of looking at her. She's so pretty.
Stephen followed Susan around the house with a camcorder, used a small mirror to spy on her while she used the bathroom, stole her underwear from her laundry, read her journals, and even posted love songs online under a pseudonym. The investigation into Susan Powell's disappearance revealed that Stephen had a stash of disgusting and exploitative items belonging to his daughter-in-law, including cotton balls that Susan had used to remove her nail polish, pairs of her knickers in a Ziploc bag, toenail clippings, hair clippings, used sanitary napkins, and other horrific souvenirs, all dated with Susan's name on them. Susan was understandably disgusted by Stephen's advances, but Josh always defended his dad, saying, "That's just how he was." In 2003, Stephen confessed his amorous feelings to a stunned Susan, who rejected him, obviously. The encounter was inadvertently captured by Stephen's camcorder microphone. Insert clip here.
It'd be great to go to Colorado and see a different part of the U.S., you know?
Yeah. I'm probably wrong, but I'm really falling in love with it. Maybe I'm interpreting something that I shouldn't be interpreting. For example, when we were sitting on the couch, it just felt like you were very, I was extremely aroused, and I think you were somewhat aroused, at least I thought.
I don't know where you're going with this.
Susan, I'll tell you where
I'm married to your son, and I should just be the daughter-in-law.
I know.
Which puts me a step beneath your own children. And that's where I'm coming from. Just kind of meaning to talk to you about this. My own father doesn't kiss me, and you kiss me, and I didn't.
The Powells moved out of state soon after, partly so Susan could distance herself from Stephen. In 2005, the Powells welcomed their son Charlie, and 2 years later, Braden arrived. Susan hoped that the addition of their children would be the glue that kept their family together, because things had already started to sour between husband and wife. But in 2008, Josh was struggling to hold down a job, which forced him to file for bankruptcy. This only served to further erode his relationship with Susan. Susan's journal entries and email correspondence indicated the presence of marital discord. There was tension with Josh over his refusal to attend church services with his family and over his continued contact with Stephen despite his father's ongoing advances towards Susan. Susan's friends also pointed to Josh's extravagant spending habits and to his extremely controlling behavior towards Susan. The animosity between Susan and Josh went far beyond the normal marital spats, however. The situation was so dire that Susan began detailing the family struggles in journals and videotaping the family's assets in case a divorce turned into World War III. She knew her family was in danger, though she never had a clue that her family's demise would go down in history as one of the most chilling family annihilations in American history. In June 2008, the mother of two wrote the following: "For family and friends of Susan, all except Josh Powell, I don't trust him. I have been having extreme marital stress for 3 to 4 years now. For mine and my children's safety, I feel the need to have a paper trail. He has threatened to skip the country and told me if we divorce, there will be lawyers. If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one." As Christmas 2009 approached, things inside the Powell's marriage were at their lowest point, but Susan wrongly believed her husband might have been turning over a new leaf. On the morning of December 6, Susan attended church with Charlie and Braden and then walked home with a friend. That afternoon, neighbor Giovanna Owing stopped by the Powell home to visit with Susan. Susan had asked her to come over to help her untangle some yarn she was using to crochet a blanket for Charlie. Pancakes and eggs were on the menu for dinner that evening, and Josh was the chef. Josh said Giovanna could stay for dinner, but her kids couldn't come as he didn't have enough food. As the two women untangled the knotted web of yarn, the boys helped Josh in the kitchen. An artificial, half-decorated Christmas tree stood in the corner of the Powell's living room, and Susan was waiting on Josh to get the rest of the ornaments down from a high shelf in the garage. There were already presents for the kids under the tree. While Josh was backing further and further away from the church, Susan was spending more and more of her time there. She had put money aside for tithing, a requirement to enter the temple, against Josh's wishes. Tithing, I believe, is putting aside 10% of your income earnings. I remember this from my old days when I loved watching the Shaytards, which were like a Mormon family vloggers. So tithing is basically putting some of your money aside to give to the church. Susan explained to Giovanna that she and Josh had started to go to marriage counseling through the church, but Josh had stopped attending the sessions and wasn't reading a marriage book that had been assigned to them as homework. It was rare that Susan had the opportunity to vent to friends about her marriage, and Giovanna was nervous about having a conversation with Josh there. Giovanna told the Salt Lake Tribune, "I didn't want to go into it that night because I felt that this should be a private conversation where I could talk with her and not have him butt in. He had a tendency to butt in." At some point during Giovanna's visit, Susan remarked that she was cold. Josh stopped what he was doing and brought her a blanket. Giovanna was impressed by the sweet gesture. Perhaps he wasn't as bad as she had heard, especially since he was making dinner and actively involving Charlie and Braden in the process. When the meal was ready, Josh brought a plate to Giovanna and his wife on the love seat, then sat down at the kitchen table with the boys to eat. Giovanna said, "It was nice because the last time I had been there, he had to dominate the conversation. He had to be the one at the center of attention and at the center of everything. When he came into her room, it was all about Josh, what Josh had to say. This time it wasn't like that, and I thought, that's really nice." Around 5 p.m., Susan decided to lay down for a nap. Giovanna assumed Susan was just worn out from a recent miscarriage and an ear infection she had been battling. Giovanna stayed until about 5:30 p.m., untangling the yarn. When Josh told Charlie and Braden to get ready to go sledding, Giovanna saw herself out. Another neighbor spotted Josh return with the boys around 8:30 p.m. 3 hours later, Marco Bastidas, another neighbor who lived one house away from the Powells, was locking up his car when he heard an alarm sounding inside the closed garage at the Powell home. Oddly, the house was dark, and when the alarm continued to sound, Marco's sister suggested he alert the neighbors. But it was getting late, and Marco didn't want to bother anyone. Eventually, the alarm shut off. Meanwhile, yet another neighbor may have been tipped off that something was amiss in the Powell home. She heard a man and a woman arguing, and would later tell police she regretted not getting up and looking out the window to see where the angry voices were coming from. When the Powell's garage door opened and the family's blue minivan emerged later that night, no one saw or heard a thing. It was approximately 12:30 a.m. when Josh Powell said he loaded his boys into the minivan and took them camping at Simpson Springs Campground, some 25 miles west of Vernon in the remote desert of Tooele County. Susan, he said, stayed at home and slept. It was snowing, and the area experienced sub-zero temperatures that night. A co-worker of Stephen Powell's would later recall that Stephen had told her he accompanied the Powell boys on the trip, where they sat around a campfire, roasted marshmallows, and threw snowballs. The conversation between Stephen Powell and his colleague would shed more light on what happened to Susan as time went by. Between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. on December 10th, the Powell's daycare provider grew concerned that something was wrong with the family when the couple failed to drop off Charlie and Braden on schedule. Stranger yet, the daycare provider could not reach neither Josh nor Susan at home or on their mobiles. The daycare provider contacted Josh's mother and sister, who immediately became concerned and contacted the police. Police arrived at the Powell home and broke in, but nobody was home. Ominously, however, they discovered 2 large fans blowing on a wet spot of carpet. Upon further searching, investigators found traces of blood on the floor, life insurance policies for Susan for $1.5 million, and a handwritten letter from Susan expressing fear for her life. DNA test results later released in 2013 matched one blood sample with Susan, while another sample was determined to have come from an unknown male contributor. Police interviewed the couple's eldest son, Charlie, who confirmed the camping trip that Josh described took place. However, unlike his father, he stated that Susan had gone with them, but she did not return home. Weeks after her disappearance, a teacher reported that Charlie had claimed that his mother was dead. Furthermore, Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy, claimed that while at daycare several months after the disappearance, Braden drew a picture of a van with 3 people in it and told the carers that Mommy is in the trunk. That evening after Susan's disappearance, when Josh finally answered his cell phone, he was informed by concerned friends and neighbors that the police were waiting for him at his house. When Josh arrived home, he was immediately taken to the West Valley Police Station for questioning. He gave them his nonsensical story about the spontaneous camping trip in dangerous winter weather. He seemed nervous.
I just spoke with some of our other detectives, and you're gonna have to wait here with us. You're not gonna go anywhere. One of our detectives just interviewed your children, and your children are telling our detectives that Mom went with you guys last night, and that she didn't come back.
She did not go with us.
Okay, well, with that, just getting that information, you're not gonna go anywhere. I'm not gonna let you leave. I'm gonna detain you. You sit right here. If you want a lawyer and you want to talk, or you want to change your mind and talk, or take a CBSA test, then we can do those things. But
Now with that in mind,
They know that she didn't go with us.
well, here's the thing, kids are very honest. That's one thing I've learned in the years of doing this job. That when kids talk to us, we'll listen because they're honest. And they never lie, they don't make things up. So if they're saying they were with you, they were with you. Okay, I mean, she was with you. So I have to believe the kids. So now it's gonna be up to you if you wanna help us find her and help us get to the bottom of what really happened here. That's what we're here for, okay? We're gonna find out either way, with your help or without your help. I honestly don't need your help. I feel confident enough in my investigation and his investigation and everybody else involved. We have great detectives in this department that will find out what happened. We'll get to the bottom of this, with your help or without your help. So I want to give you the opportunity to help us and tell us what really happened. Because you're the only one that knows.
Nothing that happened. She was not with us. And if my kids said that,
So your kids lie then? Do your kids lie?
sometimes they do. I mean, if they said that she was with us, they know that's not true.
So if they
And
say...
if they said that she was with us, then I
Then
guess
what?
that would put her out in the Pony Express.
Okay, and that's my concern.
Police visited Simpson Springs on December 10th, but found no evidence of the campsite that Josh had described. They also found it suspicious that Josh would take his young children out camping after midnight when he was scheduled to go to work at his job just hours later. Josh had not told his boss that he would not be coming into work that day and explained to police it was because he thought it was Sunday rather than Monday. Where was Susan? If she had gotten out of bed and decided to leave, she left the house unprepared. The West Valley Police found Susan's bag, phone, and other items in the house that she most likely would have taken with her. On December 10th, Josh, Charlie, and Braden, along with 100 neighbours and friends, gathered at Westview Park for a candlelit vigil. They handed out flyers and prayed for Susan's safe return, and Josh shed a few crocodile tears for the cameras. In 2012, West Valley City Police released documents showing that Josh took actions that were regarded as highly suspicious following Susan's disappearance. Josh liquidated Susan's retirement accounts, cancelled her regular scheduled chiropractic sessions, and withdrew his children from daycare. He had also previously spoken to a co-worker about how to hide a body in an abandoned mine shaft in the western Utah desert. As the investigation into Susan's disappearance unfolded, Susan's family held a press conference and an anonymous donor offered a reward of $10,000. Josh's rental car was searched by police and they found that he had driven the vehicle several hundred miles. The family's minivan, along with the home, was searched multiple times. In late December, Josh lawyered up and stopped cooperating with the police, leading those involved to infer that he wasn't interested in his wife being found. Police obtained a subpoena for all of Josh's media interviews due to his odd behaviour. They wanted to see what clues they could glean from his demeanour and tone of voice, which were undoubtedly apathetic and suspicious. Anyone who thought Josh might have been a grieving husband changed their minds in January 2010, just a month after Josh's wife disappeared. Josh packed up his and the boys' belongings in preparation for a move back to Washington State. On January 11th, just a month after his wife disappeared, Josh recruited his friends and neighbours to help him load a moving van and trailer. Josh further eroded his own credibility on February 26, 2010, when he, along with his father, launched the website susanpowell.org. The creation of the website led to a feud between Susan and Josh's families. The website may have been launched as a ruse for trying to find Susan, but it was mostly a platform for the Powell family to disparage Susan and defend themselves against attacks from Susan's family. Earlier that year in December, a year after Susan vanished, Josh accused his wife of leading a double life and plotting to divorce him. He linked Susan to Stephen Kocher, another Utah man who went missing in December 2009. Josh used the website to further accuse Susan of having an affair. Just when it seemed Susan's case had gone cold, a judge issued a warrant allowing investigators to search Josh's Washington home, where Josh was living with Charlie, Braden, and his crazy father, Stephen. The warrant came a day after Stephen Powell's disgusting ABC News interview in which he claimed he'd had a sexual relationship with Susan prior to her disappearance.
Susan was very, very sexual with me. She was very flirtatious. I mean, I'm her father-in-law, and she would do a lot of things that I mean, she was just, she did it, I did. I mean, we interacted in a lot of sexual ways because Susan enjoys doing that.
Do you think a part of you started falling in love with Susan?
That's pretty likely, yeah. I mean, yeah, I would say so. And there's no question in my mind that the feelings were mutual.
Stephen told Good Morning America There was really a disconnect between Susan, who was the faithful, loving wife, and the Susan who was a very flirtatious, sexual being. Father-in-law, daughter-in-law flirting with each other, maybe some sexual touching or whatever, and I enjoyed it, frankly. Susan was a joy to be around in so many ways, not just those ways. The biggest threat to Josh Powell's freedom was his own sons. Josh had hoped that they would either keep their mouths shut or that they would be too young to remember or understand what had happened to their mom. Josh Powell had told the police that Susan stayed home in bed that night and that she did not go on the camping trip. But Charlie did not back up his dad's story. When interviewed, Charlie told investigators that he went camping at Dinosaur National Park and that his mom, dad, and little brother were with him. He said the family took flowers and crystals with them, but when it was time to come home, Charlie explained, "My mom stayed where the crystals are." When confronted with his son's testimony, Josh told the police, "She was not with us. They know that's not true." Charlie and Braden were removed from Josh's custody in 2011 and placed in the care of Susan's parents. Josh was only allowed supervised visits. A judge ordered that the boys remain with Chuck and Judy until Josh underwent a psychosexual evaluation and took a polygraph test. While in the care of Chuck and Judy, the boys became increasingly more vocal about what happened on the night of that bizarre camping trip. Susan's parents' lawyer, Stephen Downing, said they were beginning to verbalize more. The oldest boy talked about that they went camping and that Mommy was in the trunk. Mom and Dad got out of the car and Mom disappeared. Charlie made a drawing showing him and his brother in the family minivan with Josh at the wheel. When asked where Mommy was, Charlie replied, "In the trunk." He added that Mommy and Daddy got out of the minivan and Mommy didn't come back. Anne Bremer, an attorney for the Coxes, explained that the boys only began to feel safe enough to share what happened during the camping trip after they went to live with Susan's parents. Though the boys were too young to fully explain what happened that night, each time one of them spoke, a clearer picture emerged. She said in 2012, "I know that to be true in this case because as recently as Christmas, the boys told their grandparents, 'Mommy is in the mine. If we go to the mine, we'll find Mommy.'" Investigators' scrutiny extended to Stephen upon learning from a family friend that he had been obsessed with his son's wife. Computer images seized from his house in 2010 turned up 4,500 images of Susan taken without her knowledge, including close-ups of specific body parts. Police also turned their attention to Michael, Josh's brother, after learning that he had sold his broken-down Ford Taurus to a wrecking yard in Pendleton, Oregon, shortly after Susan's disappearance, and had later ordered satellite images of the lot. When police found the car, a sniffer dog indicated that a decomposing human body had been in the trunk. DNA tests on the car proved inconclusive. On September 14, 2011, Utah authorities discovered a possible gravesite while searching Topaz Mountain, a desert area near the campsite that Josh had frequented. There were signs of recent soil disturbance and shoveling, but after digging a few feet down, police were unable to find any remains in spite of careful sifting of the soil. Federal anthropologists also ruled out the possibility of the site being an ancient burial ground. Police continued to examine the site for a time, but offered no explanation as to why they previously announced the finding of remains when none had actually been confirmed. Authorities said they were following a scent detected by their sniffer dogs. Relations between and within the Powell and Cox families became increasingly hostile. After a police raid in their home in 2011, both Josh and Stephen spoke to major news outlets regarding journals that Susan had allegedly written about the relationship between Stephen and herself. Stephen claimed that he and Susan had been falling in love prior to her disappearance, and he cited the content of the journals, written when Susan was a teenager, as evidence to support his theory that she was mentally unstable and could have run away with another man. A judge issued a permanent injunction forbidding Josh and Stephen from publishing any material from Susan's journals, ordering the pair to either return or destroy any journals already published. On September 22nd, Stephen was arrested on charges of voyeurism and child pornography after police found evidence that he had secretly videotaped numerous women and young girls, including Susan. John Long, assistant attorney for the Washington state, said that Josh was a subject in the child pornography investigation. A friend of Stephen claimed that he was preoccupied with pornography and was hung up on Susan. Chuck Cox filed for custody of Susan's children the day after Stephen was arrested. A Washington court eventually granted Susan's parents temporary custody of the boys, ruling that Josh would have to move out of Stephen's home if he wanted to regain custody. Josh rented a house in South Hill, but authorities later alleged that he had never actually moved into that house, merely making it appear as if he had satisfied the court's instructions while continuing to reside at Stephen's house. In late September 2011, Josh's sister Jennifer stated that she believed Josh was responsible for his wife Susan Powell's disappearance. His other sister Alina had also been suspicious of him as well. However, she later withdrew her suspicions and felt that Josh had been unduly harassed by the investigation. By this time, West Valley City had spent more than $500,000 on the case, and on September 28th, Mayor Mike Winder indicated that he felt the case was worth the expense, stating, "We feel that we are getting to the point, that tipping point, where we have more hot evidence than we have had in the past 2 years, and that the case is moving forward." In late 2011, Josh underwent a series of court-ordered evaluations in Washington. The evaluations by James Manley determined that Josh had adequate parenting skills, a steady employment history, and no criminal record or history of domestic violence. However, Manley also raised issues concerning the ongoing criminal investigations, Josh's failure to admit normal personal shortcomings, his overbearing behavior with his sons, and his persistent defensiveness and paranoia. The initial recommendation was for Josh to have visitation with his sons several times a week, supervised by a social worker. In the last week of January 2012, Utah police discovered about 400 images of simulated child pornography, bestiality, and incest on a computer seized from the Powell family home. Their pornography had been cached when viewed by the previous owner of the computer, which had been purchased by Susan secondhand. However, Utah authorities misled the court and accused Josh of having viewed the images. The images, while not illegal due to their being in a hand-drawn or cartoonish 3D format, were cause for great concern to Manley, particularly given Josh's earlier denial of possessing any such material. Josh was recommended to receive a more thorough psychosexual evaluation and polygraph test, but Manley suggested no change in the visitation schedule with the Powell boys. On February 5th, 2012, this case took an even darker turn. 911 received a call from a social worker, Elizabeth Griffin Hall, who had taken Charlie and Braden to a supervised visit at Josh's house in South Hill. That morning, the two boys told their grandparents they didn't want to go and see their dad. They wanted to stay at home. Their grandmother reassured the boys that everything would be okay, that their dad had some fun things planned for them to do, and that they would have a great time. The social worker picked up the boys and drove them 10 minutes over to Josh's house. The social worker, who was supposed to monitor the visit between Josh and the boys, reported that the boys ran to Josh in excitement, but he grabbed them. He gave her a weird look and then slammed the door in her face and locked it. The social worker knocked on the door and shouted to let her in. She heard Josh say, "Charlie, I have a big surprise for you," and then heard Braden crying and screaming. It was later discovered at this point Josh was attacking his sons in the face with a hatchet. The social worker began to smell gasoline. Worried, she called 911. Unable to remember the exact address, she went back to her car to get the information for the dispatcher.
But I think I need help right away. He's on a very short lease with CSHS, and CPS has been involved. And this is the craziest thing. He looked right at me and closed the door. And I'd like to pull out of the driveway because I smell gasoline and he won't let me in. This could be life-threatening. He went to court on Wednesday and he didn't get his kids back. And this is really, I'm afraid for their lives.
Soon after, the house exploded, killing Josh and the two children.
He blew up the house and the kids. He slammed the door in my face. So I kept knocking. I thought it was a mistake. Kids were one step ahead of me. They're 5 and 7. They were one step ahead of me, and he slammed the door in my face.
Local authorities treated the case as a double murder-suicide, saying that the act appeared to have been deliberate. When authorities notified Stephen, who was in jail, he didn't seem very upset by the news, but angry towards authorities who notified him. 2 weeks later, Stephen invoked his Fifth Amendment right to not answer any questions regarding Susan's disappearance. Susan's family and others stated that they believed Stephen had known exactly what happened to Susan. Stephen was convicted of voyeurism charges in May 2012 in a trial which largely skirted the issue of Susan's case. After a relatively brief investigation, officials confirmed that the explosion had been deliberate and planned. The official cause of the death for Josh and the 2 boys was determined to be carbon monoxide poisoning, though the coroner also noted that the boys had significant chopping injuries on the head and neck, meaning that these 2 boys survived their attack by hatchet by their dad and just died from smoke inhalation. The hatchet was recovered near Josh's body, and investigators believe that that is what he attacked the boys with, before being overwhelmed by the smoke and fumes. The fire investigation also found 2 5-gallon cans of gasoline on the premises, as well as evidence that gasoline had been spread throughout the house. Friends and relatives of Josh told authorities that he had contacted them by email minutes before the incident to say goodbye. Some of them, including his pastor, received instructions for finding his money and shutting off his utilities. Records also showed that Josh had withdrawn $7,000 from his bank account and had donated his children's toys and books to local charities the day before the incident. Josh named Michael as the main beneficiary of his life insurance policy. Charles and Braden are buried at Woodbine Cemetery, which also contains a memorial for their mom. Josh's remains were cremated. On February 11, 2013, approximately 1 year after the death of Josh and his sons, Michael, Josh's brother, took his own life in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where he had moved for graduate school. He jumped from the roof of a parking garage. Police had questioned Michael several times in 2012 after discovering his abandoned Ford at the Oregon wrecking yard. Michael was evasive about why he had left the car at that location. Utah authorities have since said they believe that Josh and Michael were accomplices in the murder of Susan. On May 21, 2013, West Valley City Police announced that they had closed the active investigation into Susan's disappearance. In March 2015, Chuck, Susan's dad, won a protracted court battle with Tarika and Alina Powell over control over Susan's estate. Tarika and Alina had sought to have Susan declared legally dead to collect life insurance, but Susan's family ultimately gained full control over her estate. Susan's family also sued Washington's Department of Social and Health Services, the DSHS, claiming that the agency prioritized Josh's parental rights over the safety of the boys and that they facilitated their deaths. While a lower court initially ruled against Susan's family, the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit reversed this ruling and allowed the case to proceed to trial in January 2019. Susan's family also pressured state lawmakers in Washington and Utah to pass bills that would restrict or block visitation rights for parents being investigated for murder. Stephen Powell was released from prison on July 11, 2017, after serving a total of 7 years following his voyeurism and child pornography convictions. He died of natural causes in Tacoma, Washington on July 23, 2018. Susan remains a missing person, but given the fates of her sons, it is widely believed that she was murdered by her husband, Josh. There were calls as of March 2018 to have her declared dead, with the cause being homicide. Chuck and Judy, Susan's parents, have spent the past 8 years in agony while trying to find some semblance of justice. When it finally seemed like they were on the verge of finding some closure earlier last year, the COVID pandemic brought everything to a halt. I don't know anything else I could have done, and they're still dead. My daughter is still missing, and now the children are dead, said Susan's dad. I had them safe. They were in my care. Why take the kids? Why? It makes absolutely no sense, he said. Susan's dad says the legal battle is not about the money. The money, unfortunately, is the only thing we have. We can't force DSHS to do anything. We have been robbed of 3 precious lives, and it is just devastating to think the same person did it. And that brings us to the end of today's video. Let me know your thoughts on what happened to Susan down in the comments below. I just have like a bad vibe about creepy Stephen Powell, Josh's dad. I feel like he took it too far, or I don't know, I feel like he had some kind of involvement in her death. The thing with the mines, like, did they hurt her at home and then drove her to these mines to get rid of her body? The whole way everything unraveled is just so absolutely heartbreaking and unfair, and I really feel for Susan's family. They didn't just lose their daughter, they lost their grandkids too, and then the whole battle over her estate is just really shameful, and shows the Powell family are just hungry for money, where they should really just be ashamed and disgusted by their family members. Let me know your thoughts on the case below. If you have a case that you'd like me to cover in an upcoming video, please leave it in the comments below and I'll have a look. I really do prefer doing unsolved and missing people's cases to bring more awareness to them. I'm going to have a think. There's one that I really want to cover. It's a very kind of twist and turn case, but we'll see about that in a future episode. Don't forget to subscribe. I hopefully will be back with better quality next time. But thanks for staying with me on the webcam. If you stayed this far in the video, please give it a like. Don't forget to turn on the notifications. If you press the bell, you get a notification every time I post. Coming up, so it's August now, coming up to like December, I do Vlogmas. But I'm going to try and get one of these true crime videos out for you once a week if possible. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.